Are chuck roast or poor man's burn ends really as good as brisket burn ends? Let's find out. So I've got here a USDA prime brisket, the fatty side, the side with the point. Thank you to my butcher at Costco. And I've got a prime chuck roast here. There are lots of pitmasters out there, especially with brisket prices being as high as they've been the last couple of years, showing you how to make burn ends from these chuck roasts, which make great burn ends. I've done it a couple of times. There's really only one that's done a video doing them side by side that I could find. And that's my friend James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, but he makes his burn ends differently than I do. And so I figure, let's go ahead and do a test. Let's do a brisket point, traditional burn ends, right next to chuck roast burn ends, and see if we can tell the difference the way that I make them. So right now, all I'm doing is separating the actual point muscle from the flat here so that I'm working with just that good fatty meat that we make burn ends from. And I'm taking this flat down here, and that is gonna be amazing meat for the next time I make sausage. So this is my lean flat that's gonna go into the sausage pile. This is the fattier point. You can see the marbling here in this second muscle, and this is what makes those great burnt ends, because that fat renders down and makes them super juicy. So now I'm just gonna remove any fat from the outside here because I don't need it. Having fat on the outside, all that does is keeps the smoke and the rub from getting to the meat. So I'm gonna remove as much fat as I can and get this down to just meat. Now the chuck, you can see, is a lot leaner, but we still don't want these big chunks of fat in here. So I'm gonna separate these, and you're gonna see that they separate pretty easily because there's these fat lines that run along. Super careful here because anything that doesn't make it into burn ends is going to be in really delicious sausage. Why did you break down the chuck roast into pieces like this when James' experiment left his chuck roast whole? Well, the reason is that when I do burnt ends, I like to get as much smoke and flavor on each cube as I can, so I cube from the very beginning. Now, you can't do that when you're making a full packer brisket that includes the point. There you're gonna cook the point as part of it and then cut it up. But if you're cooking just burn ends for dinner, then you've got all the flexibility in the world. So what I'm gonna do is try to cut these into roughly cubes that are about the same size. They're not all gonna be cube shaped because of course I've got ends here. And by exposing all of the sides, I'm gonna get more flavor on here than if I cooked the whole chuck roast whole. Now on my point, you see how thin this is over here? This end's nice and thick. And then here, I'm just gonna cut this in half, and then I'm gonna cut them in half again. And these look like they're too big, but look what happens when I form them up. They're gonna be about the right size. So we can see this meat looks really good, but this meat looks a lot fattier. So right now, the prediction is that the brisket is still gonna win out, but let's see what happens when we get some seasoning on here. And the seasoning I'm gonna use today is the Black's barbecue seasoning. If you didn't see the video that I made with Barrett Black, where he taught me how to make OG brisket, I'll put a link at the end of this video so you can watch after you're done with this one. That was a really cool video and I learned a ton. I'm gonna go a nice heavy coat of seasoning. I don't need a binder. This meat is wet enough. And then I'm gonna turn these and toss them in the extra that's down there. So let me get these onto a rack that'll make it easy for us to move it on and off of the smoker. All right, I'll meet you at the grill. I love the smell of flamethrower in the morning. This is Boba Fett. He's my Yoder Durango 24 offset smoker. Notice he's got a rack of ribs already on here. That's for another video I'm making where I'm gonna compare smoked ribs to grilled ribs. So I'm gonna put the burn end trays right on here with the ribs, and I'm gonna come back once in a while and rotate them so that hot spots don't play a factor in the taste or how quickly these things cook. So I'll be back to check on them in about an hour and probably rotate them then. For now, let's get some smoke on them. All right, so we're an hour in. You can see these ribs are looking good, but also these burnt ends are looking good. They're starting to look more similar. So I'm gonna go ahead and just rotate these, and I'm gonna do that every hour just to make sure that there's no hot spots, that everything cooks evenly. We'll be back and see how we're doing in about an hour. All right, 2 hours in. Let's take a look at how these are looking here. All right, so you can definitely tell that this is brisket over here and that this over here is chuck, but they're looking closer and closer to the same. So I think now that it's set, I mean, this is nowhere near done. I mean, it's not tender or anything. Now I want to get into that delicious burnt end braise. I'm going to start by putting all of these chuck ends over here into this pan. And I'm going to take all of these brisket ones and put them into this pan. Now for our braising liquid, we're just going to do something really simple here. So I'm going to start with just beef bone broth. You can use stock if you don't have bone broth, but this stuff is easy to find at the grocery store. The other half, I'm going to split up this bottle of Pitmaster Harry Sue's original Slap Your Daddy barbecue sauce. This is his championship barbecue sauce. One of my favorite collabs was the one that I did with Harry, where he taught me how to make competition brisket versus my backyard brisket, and then we did the same thing for ribs. And I got to try a lot of his products. So we've got this beefy and sweet and tangy mixture now. And I'm just gonna cover this, just trap some of the steam in there for this next stage of the cook. Brisket's going back on over here. Remember that, Nick. Chuck is going on over here in the braise. And those probably have an hour and a half or 2 hours until they get nice and tender. We'll be back and check them in like an hour when we check the ribs. Okay, so you can see those ribs are off already. Let's see how our burnt ends are doing. So these are the chuck. You can see they're a little warm. I'm wearing a glove with a glove liner. Don't take any risks here. Oh yeah, these are nice and tender. So what I'm gonna do is take these and throw them in a new pan out of the braising liquid. All right, and let's see how our brisket burnt ends are doing. Yeah, look at that. All right. I could have done these in the same pan, but I don't have any place to dump the braising liquid. So we're just gonna swap them here. And now I've got another bottle of a different Harry Sue barbecue sauce. This is his All-American, and I'm All-American. So we're gonna America these up and just toss them in the sauce. We're not gonna cover them. We're just gonna leave these back on the pit, and then back go our chucks, and back go our briskets. Remember, brisket here, chuck there. Remember that, guys. All right. We'll let these glaze for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then it'll be time to eat. Okay, so I have a confession to make. Well, Nick has a confession to make. Remember all those times you heard me say, hey, Nick, remember which one's which? We don't remember which one's which. And they look pretty similar. So we'll see if I can tell the difference. I mean, I don't think there's any way that the chuck is better than the brisket. So if one's better, we're gonna assume that's the brisket. But if I can't tell the difference, that's gonna say a lot about this method of cooking chuck. I'm gonna try this one first. Looks nice and tender. I don't know, let's take a bite. Delicious, not super juicy. I'm gonna venture a guess this was the chuck. Here's a piece of what I hope is brisket. It feels softer. All right, cheers. Yep. Taste, like I'm not throwing these away. I'm gonna eat all of these, and so are Leah and so is Nick. Doesn't matter how you slice it though. The brisket makes better burnt ends than anything other than maybe pork belly. I've made pork belly burnt ends that are good. Maybe the next battle I do will be a brisket point versus pork belly burnt ends or something else. If you got an idea of what I should make burnt ends from, make sure you leave me a note in the comments. And watch this video next. I think you're really gonna like it, and I'll see you next time on Eat More Vegans.